It was the kind of evening that should have felt like a win. Rooftop restaurant, clear Denver skyline, and a bottle of wine so expensive it didn't even have a label. Lauren called it a small dinner with potential investors, which she framed like it was a routine part of her consulting work. I didn't argue, it sounded harmless enough, and after all, we used to attend these events together. It used to be fun, even, but something felt different about this one, right from the start. She'd been vague about the details. Said it was an informal meet and greet, with a few corporate folks visiting from out of town. I offered to skip it, said I didn't want to be the only non-finance person there making awkward small talk over scallops. But she insisted. Come, she said. It'll be nice to have you there. I wanted to believe that was true. The place was beautiful, no doubt. Minimalist furniture, string lights draped between glass panels, ambient jazz rolling off discreet ceiling speakers. You could see the whole city laid out in front of you like a glowing circuit board. Waiters in dark aprons floated by with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres you had to Google just to pronounce. The kind of place you dress up for, even if you're just pretending to talk shop. Lauren looked incredible, elegant, effortless. She wore a fitted black dress I didn't recognize, probably new, and a scent that was sharper than what she normally used. Not bad, just bold. Her hair was pinned up in that way that made her seem taller, more commanding. She belonged in that room in a way I never quite did. We were midway through the second course when her phone buzzed. It wasn't loud, just a light vibration on the table, but enough to make her glance down. For half a second, her face changed. I saw it, subtle but undeniable. A flicker of something, surprise or maybe anticipation. It was like watching someone get caught smiling at a secret. Then, just as quickly, the mask slipped back on. She turned the phone over, screen down, and offered me a breezy smile. Sorry. Work. The marketing team's having a meltdown over a deck design. I nodded, pretending not to care, but something about the way she flipped it, too quick, too casual, didn't sit right. And then I saw it. In the reflection of the window behind her. Just a sliver of light bouncing off glass. Her phone screen had flashed long enough to catch an image. A small circular profile picture. A man's face. And not just any man. I recognized the face, even if I hadn't met him. It was the same face printed on a business card she'd left on the kitchen counter that morning, wedged half under a magazine. I remembered picking it up out of habit. Tyler Reed, Consulting and Corporate Affairs. That's all it said, printed in minimalist black type on a thick matte card. I assumed it was just another one of those contacts she gathered during conferences, mixers, or off-site events. Nothing unusual. But now that face, his face, had lit up her screen. No name, just the image. No preview text either, which meant the message had come through one of those encrypted apps. WhatsApp, Signal, maybe Telegram. Apps where names could be hidden and messages could vanish. Still smiling, she reached for her wine glass and took a slow sip, as if nothing had happened. Hey, I said, keeping my voice neutral. That card on the counter this morning. Was that from your purse? She didn't miss a beat. Oh, that? No, that was from a presentation consult I'm doing for one of the firms downtown. They're prepping for a pitch next week. I'm just helping them polish their slides. Tyler Reed, right? I asked. She blinked once, then laughed. Yeah, that's him. Super dry guy. Not even a little interesting. Why? I shrugged. Just curious. She tilted her head at me then, just slightly, and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Are you seriously jealous right now? Come on. Don't be that guy. There it was, the pivot. I'd seen it before. It was her go-to move whenever I poked too close to something she didn't want to explain. Turn the tables. Make me insecure for even asking. Jealous was a word she used like a wee *p*n. Not because she believed it, but because she knew I hated how it made me sound. I let out a soft laugh and shook my head. Not jealous. Just wondering why a guy from corporate affairs is messaging you in the middle of dinner. She leaned forward slightly, smile fading. Because I work with him. This is what happens when you run a business. People need things. Designs, edits, feedback. That's literally my job. Remember? I nodded. Sure. She leaned back again, sipping her wine. Honestly, this is the problem. Every time I talk to someone with a Y chromosome, you act like I'm having an affair. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than any reply. And in that silence, I saw the flicker of something cross her face. A shadow of annoyance, maybe guilt. Passed quickly. She glanced down at her plate, then smiled again, switching the subject to one of the investors across the room. I played along, nodded, even smiled a little, but the rest of the evening blurred after that. I barely remember the dessert, or the awkward elevator ride down, or what she talked about on the way to the car. What I do remember is the look in her eyes when she turned that phone over, the tension in her shoulders, the fact that her lock screen had no notifications, no names, no timestamps, just that one face. And more than anything else, I remember the weight of the card in my pocket. I had slipped it off the counter earlier that morning, intending to throw it away, but something about it had made me pause, maybe the thickness of the cardstock or maybe just the odd, empty title, Consulting and Corporate Affairs. Back then, it hadn't meant much. Now, it felt like the first breadcrumb in a trail I hadn't meant to follow. But I would, because something had changed. Not in a loud or obvious way. No screaming matches, no lipstick on collars, no dramatic slam doors. Just a shift in the temperature. A look that lingered too long. A laugh that felt too easy. A screen turned over just a little too fast. And deep down, under all the dinner wine and city lights and polite conversation, something inside me had started to crystallize. There was a secret, and it was getting closer. The drive home that night was mostly quiet, except for the occasional voice from the GPS and the low hum of tires against pavement. Lauren tapped through her phone beside me, answering emails or pretending to. I didn't ask. I didn't say much of anything. I just kept my hands at 10 and 2, my eyes on the dark stretch of I-25 ahead, and let the silence settle between us like fog. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. That reflection in the window, his face, kept looping in my head. It hadn't been a hallucination. I know what I saw. It wasn't one of those fleeting moments where your mind tricks you into seeing something you want to see. No, it was him, Tyler Reed. The same name, the same face, the same business card that she now claimed was just part of a project. But it wasn't just that night that bothered me. It was everything before it. All the strange little inconsistencies that had piled up like static noise. Things I hadn't put together until now. It was like someone handed me a flashlight and suddenly the room was full of details I hadn't seen. The new perfume, for starters. Lauren used to wear something soft and citrusy. Familiar, warm. This one was sharper, like jasmine dipped in alcohol. Not bad exactly, but it felt out of place, like she wasn't wearing it for me. Then there were the passwords. She changed the one on her laptop first, said her client files needed more security. That made sense, I guess. But then she updated the passcode on her phone and the login for our shared Google Drive. The one we used to share budgets, photos, even our vacation planning doc. She said it was just a sync issue. I didn't push. At the time, it felt like one of those benign tech quirks you forget about. But now, in hindsight, it was like being quietly shut out of the parts of her life she no longer wanted me to see. The late-night calls used to be common. Her job ran across time zones. West Coast, sometimes London. At first, I didn't mind hearing her pacing the living room at 11 p.m. pitching ideas or reviewing slides. It was just part of the hustle. But over the last couple of months, those calls had stopped. And it wasn't that the work went away. It was that the pacing turned to whispers, then silence. And eventually, they just didn't happen at all. Then there were the Uber receipts. One popped up in our shared expense tracker, an address in a part of town where she had no clients, no known meetings. I asked her about it casually. She said she had met a friend for lunch. I let it go. But then another one showed up a week later, same general area. Then another. Always in the mid-afternoon, always returning late into the evening. And the conference in Salt Lake City? I'd suggested tagging along, thinking maybe we could tack on a ski day or a hike. She *T that down fast. Said it was just her and 2 women from her team, and they'd already booked an Airbnb. It's a girl trip, basically, She'd laughed. You'd hate it. At the time, I believed her. Or at least I tried to. But the more I thought about it now, the more it all formed a pattern. Not one big explosion, but a slow leak. A carefully curated distance. A creeping separation disguised as independence. Even at home, things had changed. She started coming back later than usual. Sometimes well after midnight. No explanation. No apology. Just a quick, sorry. Client dinner ran long. As she kicked off her shoes and walked past me like I wasn't even there, she started bringing her phone into the bathroom with her, even in the mornings. Left the shower running longer than usual. When I peeked in once, just to check if she'd left her curling iron on, her phone was on the counter, screen turned face down, muted. A little green dot pulsed in the corner. Signal, maybe, or some other app one didn't recognize. Back in the early days of our relationship, we used to have a rule. No secrets, no passwords. Not because we were paranoid, but because we didn't have anything to hide. If her phone rang while she was driving, I'd pick it up and answer it for her. If I needed to check a calendar invite, I'd open her laptop without thinking twice. Now, I wouldn't dare. And not because I was afraid of being caught snooping, but because I already knew what I'd find. I just didn't have the courage yet to confirm it. I found myself playing back old moments in my head like a detective at a corkboard. A hand resting too long on a wine glass. A text that made her smile, then vanish. A quiet MMM she made while staring at her phone. Unaware I was watching her from the hallway. And maybe the most damning thing wasn't even anything she did. It was what she stopped doing. She used to reach for me in bed. Not always for S*X, just for closeness. A hand across my chest. Her legs tangling with mine. But lately, she curled up on her side of the mattress like a cat defending territory. Her phone would buzz softly under her pillow, and I'd pretend to be asleep. Even her language had shifted. She used to say, we. Now she said, I have a client dinner. I'm working late. I need some space. Space. That word again. I used to think maybe it was just burnout. Her job was demanding, and I knew she struggled with feeling stretched thin. I gave her grace, thinking it would pass. But now I realized what I'd been doing wasn't grace. It was denial. Willful blindness. The kind where you tell yourself 1,000 tiny lies just to keep one big truth from setting in. But after that dinner on the rooftop, there was no more pretending. I knew. I didn't know the full extent or the timeline or how far it had gone. But I knew enough. Enough to feel the acid sting of betrayal crawling up my spine. And I also knew something else. Lauren was smart. Not the type to make reckless decisions. If this was happening, if she really was involved with Tyler or whoever else, then it wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't a spontaneous detour. This was calculated, structured, protected. There was intention behind it. And intention is the one thing you can't mistake for an accident. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. There's a difference between suspicion and proof. Between instinct and evidence. She was good at spinning things. Turning the tables, playing the victim, rewriting the narrative mid-argument until I was the one apologizing for asking too much. No, if I was going to ask the question, I had to be sure. But that night, lying beside her in bed, staring up at the dark ceiling while she scrolled silently through her phone, I realized something that made my stomach clench. She wasn't worried. She didn't even feel the need to hide it anymore. That meant one of two things. Either she thought I was too naive to notice, or she didn't care if I did. And honestly, I wasn't sure which one was worse. 3 days after that rooftop dinner, I couldn't take the guessing anymore. The silence had stretched too long, too tight. Every look, every offhand laugh from Lauren felt like a calculated performance. A mask worn too easily. I'd been telling myself I just needed proof. Something undeniable. Something that would quiet the voice in my head whispering, "You already know." That Friday, she mentioned another business meeting. Same hotel. Same vague language. "Tyler's firm's in town again," she said while tying her hair in front of the mirror. "We're finalizing the presentation before next week." Her tone was light, rehearsed, almost musical. I asked where the meeting was. "The Fairmont," she said. then added, "Don't wait up. These things go late." And that was it, the final brushstroke on a picture she thought I couldn't see. When she left, I waited. 10 minutes, then 15. Long enough for her to get comfortable, for the illusion of distance to set in. Then I grabbed my keys. Not because I planned to confront her. I wasn't ready for that. I just needed to see. To replace uncertainty with something solid, no matter how much it hurt. The drive to the Fairmont felt endless. The highway lights slid across the windshield in slow, rhythmic flashes. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. 1,000 half-thoughts darted through my mind. What if I was wrong? What if she really was just working late? But the other half of me, the colder half, already knew how the night would end. When I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted her car almost immediately, parked neatly near the side entrance, the spot she always chose because it's closest to the elevators. The dashboard glowed faintly blue. Inside, the lobby buzzed with the usual Friday night chatter. Tourists at the bar, a wedding party near the elevators, the faint echo of jazz from the lounge. My pulse thudded in my throat as I scanned the room. I told myself I was just going to check, confirm, then leave. No drama, no scene, just knowledge. The bar sat on the far end of the lobby, all marble and brass, dimly lit but with wide mirrors behind the shelves that reflected everything. I slipped into a corner seat by a pillar, pretending to check messages. And there she was. Lauren sat near the window, her coat draped neatly over the back of her chair. Her posture was relaxed, her expression open, unguarded. Across from her sat a man. Broad shoulders, expensive suit, dark hair. Even from this distance, I recognized the outline of his face. Tyler Reed. They were laughing. Not the forced kind of laugh people use in meetings, but something looser, freer. His hand rested casually on the table. Hers wasn't far from it. I tried to tell myself I might be misreading it. Maybe they were just close colleagues. Maybe it was nothing. But then he leaned in, said something that made her smile, really smile, the way she used to when she forgot the world existed. And then his hand slid from the table to her knee. She didn't pull away. That was it. The world seemed to go still. The sound in the room dimmed until it felt like everything was happening behind glass. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just watched. Watched her tilt her head. Watched her reach for her drink. Watched her laugh like she didn't have a husband sitting 20 feet away, unraveling from the inside out. I could have walked over, could have confronted them, made a scene, demanded the truth. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid, but because in that moment, something inside me crystallized. There was no need for words, no need for denial or spin, or apologies rehearsed in mirrors. The proof was right there in front of me, framed in candlelight and betrayal. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. The flash was off, but the lens caught enough. Their profiles, their closeness, her hand brushing his wrist. I stared at the image for a long moment, my stomach hollow. Then I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked out. Outside, the night air hit like ice. Denver's skyline blinked indifferently in the distance. Each window a tiny square of warmth that didn't belong to me anymore. I sat in my car for a long time before starting it. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked like someone else's face. Pale. Blank. I didn't feel rage, not yet. What I felt was colder, cleaner. Like a switch had been flipped. Something inside me had gone quiet. On the drive home, I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even curse her name. I just drove, steady and slow, my mind rearranging itself around this new fact. She's cheating on you. The sentence didn't feel real at first. It hovered in the air, detached, like a headline about someone else's life. But then the smaller details started clicking into place, each one a matchstick in a growing fire. The late nights, the locked phone, the perfume, the sudden surge of confidence in her voice whenever she said his name in passing, like she couldn't help the little smile that followed. None of it was paranoia. It had all been there, waiting for me to stop pretending. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked foreign. Every light, every shadow, every memory inside those walls felt tainted. I sat in the car for nearly half an hour, gripping the steering wheel like I could hold myself together by force. I thought about walking in, waking her up, throwing the photo on the table, demanding answers. But what was the point? She'd just lie. She'd twist it, deny it, maybe even cry. She was good at that, remorse without responsibility. Instead, I went inside quietly. The air was thick with her perfume. A half-empty wineglass sat on the counter. She must have come home before me, maybe assuming I'd stayed out. I walked past her office, where her laptop glowed faintly. A slideshow was open, some corporate template playing on loop, as if mocking the excuse she'd used. I didn't touch it. I just stood there for a moment, watching the cursor blink in the corner of the screen. Then I turned off the light and went upstairs. Lauren was asleep, or pretending to be. Her breathing was slow, even. She stirred slightly when I entered, then settled again. The faint glow of her phone pulsed from the nightstand. Charging, silent, locked. I stared at it for a long time. My own reflection wavered in the black glass. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to check it. I didn't need to. I already knew everything I needed to know. That night, lying awake beside her, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, I realized something simple and terrible. I wasn't heartbroken. Not yet. That would come later, maybe. For now, all I felt was certainty. Certainty that the woman I loved had chosen someone else. Certainty that whatever we'd built had already been dismantled piece by piece, long before I arrived at that hotel bar. And certainty, above all else, that love, once betrayed, doesn't shatter like glass. Corrodes. Quietly. From the inside out. Back home, the silence stretched long and wide. It wasn't the absence of noise that got to me. It was the absence of illusion. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. The house didn't feel like ours anymore. Felt like a set. Furniture arranged for comfort, not honesty. Walls soaked in quiet lies. I didn't sleep. I lay awake next to her, staring at the ceiling, feeling the shape of the photo in my pocket like a burn. Her breathing stayed steady, peaceful. Either she slept like the guiltless, or she'd perfected the art of pretending. When the sun broke through the blinds, I was already dressed. She mumbled something, maybe a question, maybe my name. I didn't answer. I left before she could start the day with a lie. I drove with no music, no GPS, just instinct. 15 miles out of the city, down a road most people overlook, was a small law office tucked behind a row of outdated real estate signs. It wasn't flashy, just a brass plaque on a wooden door. But Megan didn't need flash. She'd been my attorney for 20 years. Helped me through 2 startups, an ugly civil suit, and my father's estate. She was steady, sharp, unsentimental in a way that made people uncomfortable. But not me. When I walked into her office, she looked up from her desk and raised one eyebrow. Didn't expect to see you before quarterlies. I closed the door. It's time. She didn't ask for clarification. She just gestured to the chair across from her and turned her monitor. Betrayal or breach? Betrayal, I said, pulling the photo from my pocket and sliding it across the desk. But I'm guessing breach won't be far behind. She studied the image, then nodded. How long? Too long. But now it's confirmed. She tapped her pen against her notebook. You want the soft route or the surgical one? Surgical, I said without hesitation. No warnings. No ground to regain. She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. A thick, heavy one labeled in my handwriting. In case of betrayal. I'd made it 2 years into our marriage. Back when I still believed in just in case. It wasn't that I expected her to cheat. But I'd seen too many men walk into courtrooms with broken hearts and empty hands. So I prepared. Quietly. Respectfully. Inside were copies of our prenuptial agreement, notarized with timestamps. Also, full documentation of the down payment and mortgage on the house, my money, my name. Proof that all major renovations had been paid from my business account, not the joint one. A log of assets acquired pre-marriage, including my company shares. Bank statements showing all business income remained untouched by marital commingling. A copy of her signed acknowledgement that the house, in the event of infidelity, would remain with the party not in breach. Lauren had signed that clause herself years ago in our kitchen. Back then it was theoretical. She'd laughed playfully. "I'd never cheat," she said. "But if I do, I deserve to lose it all." Apparently she'd forgotten. I hadn't. Megan glanced through it all in silence, nodding every few pages. "Still clean," she said. "No crossover. She's made this easy." "She thinks I'm still in the dark," I said. "Good," Megan replied. "Let's keep it that way." For the next 2 hours, we laid the groundwork. She made calls. Her assistant printed records. I gave her the timeline, receipts, locations, messages. I forwarded the photo from the hotel bar, time-stamped. Then she asked, "How public do you want this?" I paused. "Not yet. If we can protect everything without a scene, I'd prefer it. But if she escalates, she won't win that fight," Megan said flatly. "But if you want silence, we'll go quiet first. Controlled moves. Not war. Not yet." We started with the bank. I initiated a full asset transfer into a protective trust I'd established years ago, separate from the marriage, designed for contingencies just like this. Lauren's name wasn't anywhere near it. Next, passwords. I reset every login tied to the house, alarm systems, cloud storage, security cams, shared drives. Anything she could access, I locked down. Not out of spite, but because damage control starts at the foundation. Then I called our financial advisor and revoked her access to investment decisions. Told him it was temporary. He didn't ask questions. I went home mid-afternoon, calm but wired, adrenaline tucked beneath the surface like a second heartbeat. Lauren wasn't there. A post-it note on the fridge said, "Client meeting. Be back late." Of course. I walked through the house like it was already a memory. The couch where she used to curl up after long days. The kitchen island where she staged her weekend work brunches. The patio she claimed she needed for client meetings that felt more casual. I opened a drawer in her office. Inside, for sketchbooks, 2 candles, and a slim stack of envelopes labeled presentation notes. I flipped one open. It was blank. No notes, no outlines, no client names, just props. I didn't get angry. I didn't break anything. I just sat in her chair and looked around. The woman I married had become someone I didn't recognize. And maybe that was the most painful part. Realizing she hadn't just betrayed me. She'd outgrown the truth. She thought I was still the man who wouldn't notice. That night, I poured myself a drink. 1 glass of whiskey, neat, and sat in my study with the lights low. I went over the file again, highlighted points, added a few annotations. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for after. Because the moment she walked into that hotel bar and let him touch her, it was already over. Lauren just didn't know it yet. And that was fine. Let her laugh a little longer. Let her think she was ahead. Because while she was out sipping cocktails and whispering secrets, I was documenting every move, every click, every password reset, every quiet wall I built between her and everything she assumed was still half hers. In chess, they call it zugzwang, when every move a player can make only makes things worse. Lauren was already there. She just hadn't seen the board yet. A week after I met with Megan, an internal memo went out across the company. The subject line was innocuous enough, Departmental Integration Initiative, but inside it read like a puffed-up press release. Effective immediately, we're welcoming a new strategic liaison to support cross-functional growth and corporate innovation. The name buried in the 3rd paragraph? Tyler Reed. It wasn't a surprise. Not to me. I'd orchestrated it. He was given a title that sounded important. Director of Strategic Projects. No one knew what it meant. That was the point. In a company like mine, the more ambiguous the title, the less real power you have. Titles are just currency for the ego. Lauren was thrilled. When she forwarded me the memo from her work email, pretending to share the news as if it had nothing to do with her, she added a line at the top. "Finally, the company's evolving. This could be huge for us." Us, she wrote, as if we were still on the same side. She didn't know that the man she was sleeping with was walking into a glass box. that his entire workspace had been outfitted with mirrored servers. Every email, every calendar edit, every file upload quietly copied to a secure admin panel. Every keystroke, every login, every late-night collaboration, with Lauren logged and time-stamped. He thought he was ascending. He didn't realize the only door behind him had already locked. Lauren strutted through the office that week like someone who'd just pulled off a coup. She wore bolder colors, smiled wider, stayed late as often as she could. "Tyler's onboarding," she said one evening as she breezed past me into the kitchen. "He's so hands-on. Finally, someone who gets it." I didn't respond. I just nodded. Watched her open a bottle of wine and talk about budget forecasting like she hadn't already forecasted the end of us. The irony was, she was right about one thing: Tyler did get it. He got meetings, presentations, progress reports. He even got access to the company portal and a shiny welcome package from HR mugs, branded folders, a company sweatshirt 2 sizes too big. What he didn't get was access to the real systems. Not without triggering invisible alerts I'd installed years ago. Measures designed for this exact kind of internal exposure. Every document he touched was already tagged. Every attempt he made to authorize changes, submit budgets, or edit policy drafts. Flagged and mirrored. And Lauren, eager to cement his position, was the one guiding him into those moves. I watched it unfold in real time. She added his name to a client pitch that wasn't hers to manage. Scheduled meetings in a conference room reserved for directors with signatory authority. A subtle violation, but still a violation. Then came the shared documents, financial frameworks, pricing models, internal drafts marked confidential. Each time she hit share, it pinged our compliance officer, who quietly rerouted copies to a secure drive. No alerts, no warning, just quiet observation. By Friday, Tyler had drafted an internal memo recommending a new resource reallocation model, something he didn't have the clearance or historical data to do. Lauren co-signed it, smiling, confident. She didn't realize the server they were using had been cloned. Everything they typed, every sentence, every revision was being read by my legal team before it ever hit another desk. I wasn't trying to embarrass them. That would come later, maybe. What I wanted now was evidence. Not just of the affair, but of the misuse, the breach of policy, the conflict of interest spelled out line by line in our company's internal ethics code, the one Lauren helped write 3 years ago. Tyler was a consultant. That meant he had no employment contract, no internal protections, no severance clause, no benefits, no say. He was a guest. And the moment he stepped out of line, we had every right to revoke his access without cause. Lauren, however, was a partner. And partners were held to a higher standard. That was where the trap really closed. If she'd simply had an affair, I could have walked away quietly. But she brought him inside. She leveraged her position to give him influence, access, and internal visibility, all without disclosure, without clearance. She broke the very rules we created to prevent this exact thing. And she did it thinking she was untouchable. What they didn't know was that 3 members of the executive board were already briefed. Quietly, discreetly, I'd met with each of them separately, walked them through the documentation, the server logs, the messages. They weren't angry. They were disappointed. Lauren had always been sharp, strategic, the kind of leader people trusted. But the moment she let her personal life bleed into professional decisions, unchecked, undocumented, she violated the trust we built. Tyler, for his part, didn't even seem aware of the rules he was breaking. Maybe Lauren had told him it was all temporary, that things would be legitimized soon. Maybe she'd promised him a contract, a promotion, a title that actually meant something. She probably believed it, too. But none of it was real. Every task he completed was busy work. Every meeting he joined was shadow play. The initiatives he drafted, never sent. The files he shared with key teams, archived, ignored. He was a ghost. A corporate hallucination with no authority and no future. The best part? His emails were riddled with the kind of language compliance teams love to dissect. I think we can push this past the standard channels. Lauren and I are aligned. Let's move quickly while we have the internal air cover. Every sentence was a nail. And Lauren? She left a digital trail so clean, so traceable, it was almost as if she wanted to get caught. She logged into restricted folders from home, forwarded meeting minutes to Tyler's personal Gmail. She even used a VPN twice, once during a weekend trip when she said she was offline, to review internal roadmaps. I watched it all unfold from my office like a chess match being played by two overconfident amateurs. They thought they were clever. They thought they were ahead. They didn't know the board had been set long before Tyler ever walked through the door. They walked in confident, hand in hand, expecting applause. But the agenda had changed. 2 items: unauthorized access review and termination for breach. Lauren's smile faltered as files were projected, emails, server logs, her signature on every misstep. Tyler tried to protest but had no contract. Security waited by the door. No yelling, no drama. Just silence as the board revoked everything. Her empire crumbled in a single, devastating vote. That night, Lauren fled to her father's estate. Edward was livid until a courier arrived. Inside the envelope, a check repaying the family loan he once lorded over me, and a note. You introduced her to Tyler. I introduced you to consequences. I never heard from him again. I poured a drink in my new office, documents in my name, fire at my back. Alone, steady, finished. One word on my lips, checkmate.